Hi, and welcome to the Valley Line. Just wanted to try out this new gimbal that my parents got for me, and hopefully you can see that it's working well. This is the face tracking, so this is going to be a lot of fun. I can already tell. But anyway, at the last video that I did on the layout tour generally, I went from Middletown down to Old Saybrook up to Hartford, did the whole Valley Line itself. But what I didn't do is I didn't give any sort of tour of the airline. Now, the airline is by prototype. It goes from New Haven, Connecticut, Cedar Hill Yard up to Middletown, Connecticut, and on up to Boston. It had been the main line between New York and Boston back in the day before the Thames River Bridge was constructed in the late 1880s in New London. You don't need to know that. But in any event, for our purposes, it runs from Cedar Hill Yard just up to Middletown. I can't model beyond Middletown. I can't model the huge swing bridge that went across at Middletown or any of that. So the airline local just comes from Cedar Hill up to Middletown and returns. It's a turn job. But prototypically, that's pretty accurate because at least we can model the airline, at least that portion of it. What I also haven't been able to do is I haven't been able to model any of the towns prototypically on the airline. But what I have done is I've done two 2x8 sections of railroad, one town on each section that includes all of the structures from a dear friend of mine who you may have read about on my blog named Chester Reck, or Chet. He's somebody that I met in the early 1980s, and he had a beautiful 4x8 layout with full interiors and all of his structures. He was very much into structure building, not so much into operation though, because he had fiber ties, brass rail. It didn't really operate very well, but it looked fantastic. So what I did eventually is I basically jacked up the structure and put a new foundation under it, which is to say that I did all new track, all new scenery, on two 2x8 modules. So it's still 32 square feet, but at least now you can see all the structures up close and right up in front of you so that you can see the interiors and whatnot. So without any further ado, I think what we'll do is we'll switch the camera around and I will give you a quick tour of the airline and you can see the structures and everything that I've been talking about. And we'll try and do that now. All right, I should probably edit all of this. Okay, so apparently there is no switching of the video while it's going. So I'm going to stop now and I will be back in a minute. So we are back and this is Old Saybrook. You'll recognize this from many of my blog posts. It's the scene that you see when you first come down into the basement. But to get you oriented a little bit, we're just going to back up and back into the room and you can see a drop down bridge right there. And that is the beginning of the airline, at least as far as I've modeled it. So what happens at the beginning of an operating session is that the airline local is staged behind the backdrop here. And then it comes out onto the drop down bridge, goes across there, and through the wall and into what is going to end up being the only accurate type scene on the airline. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and model Middlefield, generally speaking, a section of the airline that's very agricultural and very much like this. So hopefully you can see my reference photos. It's just going to be what I call generic airline locale, which Middlefield between Cedar Hill Yard and Middletown looks like that. So that's what this scene's going to be. You can see the airline local park there, left over from a previous session. So as I mentioned earlier in the intro, the two towns that I model on the airline are totally freelance and just use structures from Chet's layout. But as you can see, as we get in a bit closer, you'll see the fact that they're all just about Craftsman structures, all built in the 70s and early 1980s. Originally, the two 2x8 sections were going to be my only layout. And as a result, I wanted to have it be totally self-contained. So I had built an interchange track at the back right corner of the layout in that tunnel. And I also had some engine servicing facilities. And so that way I could, start out in the morning, hustle the engine, get everything ready, go pick up the cars from the interchange, and go to the other town, do my thing there, and then come back. That was the original plan. But as you know, having followed things on the website, I have since taken over the entire basement, and these two modules are now operationally the airline and function pretty well as such. So we have some more of the buildings here. I'm going to try real quick to show you one of the interiors. And this is just one of many that he did. So it gives you a little taste of what he really focused on was were the structures. So originally the two 2x8s had been joined in an L configuration, and if you look on the schematic here, you can see the track dead ends there. That's the old main, and that used to come through this hole here when it was in an L-shaped configuration. You can see a photo of Chet there to give proper respect to the builder of all the structures. But the old interchange track that I constructed, that has become the new main line. So fortunately, I had the presence of mind to provide for either an L-shaped configuration or an end-to-end. And what I ended up doing is separating the two sections, and they're joined in that corner. During an operating session, there's a lift out. And the lift out, of course, is out whenever we're not operating, so I can have access to the circuit breaker boxes. But the main comes out of that hole there, and the gimbal moves nice and slow and goes in there. One of the neatest scenes, I think, at least I think so, is this farm scene, which I was able to lift almost entirely intact from Chet's layout, and you can really get an idea of the flavor and sense of scenes and details that he really enjoyed. Whoa, sorry about that. Enjoyed putting on the layout. So what happens is that the train comes through the wall and out of the tunnel there and across the bridge. These modules represent my first attempt at scenery and a rail layout, and I had a huge head start because I had the structures. But my scenery has gotten a bit better, but certainly doesn't look bad. It's better than nothing for sure. So as you come into Mill Hollow, you have some switching to do here. The track arrangements aren't at all complicated. Really just one stub-in siding in each, two in Somerset and one in Mill Hollow, but provides more than enough switching on the way to and from Middletown for the local. So the airline local continues north through the backdrop there and goes behind the backdrop that is behind the Shalerville Bridge section of the Valley Line, and then pops into the other room in Middletown. And if you have seen the other layout tour video, the full layout tour video, you'll see where it comes into Middletown. That's where the airline local exchanges cars with the Valley local and does its switching in the yard there in Middletown, and then brings cars back from the Valley local back to either Mill Hollow or Somerset, and typically going back to Cedar Hill. So hopefully you've enjoyed this quick little video. I am still getting used to this gimbal. I think it hopefully is a lot steadier than the handheld phone that I used for the main layout tour video. I might have to redo that, so we will maybe do that at some other point. But thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Be kind but constructively critical, I guess, in the comments. And hope you enjoyed this little tour of the airline section of the Valley Line. Hope to see you again soon.